So I was talking to a friend the other day about how I'm running a personal finance channel now while being house poor. And she was just like, what? Well, what do you mean? What do you mean house poor? Like I had just told her that I eat soup with a fork. She was like, wait, what do you mean by house poor? And that got me thinking, what does house poor even mean? Is it a specific number? A mindset? A vibe? Let's talk about it. Hey there, I'm Paige and welcome to Nerdonomic, where we talk about geeky money topics and have a heck of a time doing it. So we're talking about house poverty today, being house poor. I know it is not the most uplifting subject, but I thought it was interesting and I wanted to really dive in. I did some digging because I was like, this is interesting. So let's talk about what the technical definition is of house poor, shall we? So when people are talking about it, the textbook definition of house poverty typically means that you're spending too much of your income on housing. And so like, how much is too much? So the general rule of thumb is anything in excess of 30 to 40% is considered unaffordable. So then you would be house poor. Now it's kind of like, well, Paige, like 30 to 40% of what, right? Like it doesn't matter what the percentage is if we don't know what we're talking about. What they're talking about there is gross income, your pre-tax income, not your net income, which, by the way, this has always been really strange to me. Lenders, when they're talking about affordability, and a lot of what we talk about in personal finance derives from the math that lenders do. When we're talking about affordability in lender terms, they base things on gross income, not net income. The net income is what you take home, right? So after any sort of taxes, deductions that come out of your paycheck. And it's always struck me as very funny because people have differences in how much they get deducted out of their paycheck. So we're not necessarily comparing apples to apples, we're comparing apples to oranges here. So let's talk about briefly why lenders use that. Apparently, I got kind of on a sidetrack. If you'll bear with me, I started off-roading. I started kind of going into the wilds, into the weeds, but I wanted to share this because I've always wondered about this. Lenders use gross income because of standardization. So that means that gross income is consistent and easier to verify from things like W-2s, pay stubs, and your tax returns. Net income can vary due to tax withholdings, deductions, benefits, and lifestyle choices. Okay, so it's standardized. It's like a unit of money. Now that's one thing. The second thing is optimism. And this is something that's tricky when you're borrowing money and why you can get into bad debt is because lenders assume a best case scenario when they're deciding whether to lend you money or not. They assume that you'll manage your other expenses responsibly. This is something that's baked into the cake, okay? Well, they don't completely assume because there's the credit score, but you know, mostly when we're thinking about like these kind of debt to income ratio things, this is an assumption that's made. They care more about whether you can technically make the payment than whether you'll thrive financially. Like that's not their concern. Can you make it? It takes precedence over will you make it. The third thing is that bigger loans equal bigger profits. So using gross over net lets them justify lending you more money. Basically, they're measuring what you can be approved for, not what will make you feel secure and comfortable. That's your job to figure it out, okay? Okay, cool. So when we're looking at that 30 to 40% of gross income, what are we factoring in to get that number? You can include your mortgage, taxes, insurance, maintenance, and utilities all together, okay? Not just your mortgage payment, everything bundled together. And if you exceed that 40% figure, you will likely have financial strain even though you own a home. All right, so that's the technical definition. What's the vibe definition? Well, here's some vibesy ways, okay? Vibesy, what's the vibesy? What's vibesy? What's a vibe, a vibration? Feel the vibration. Oh boy, okay. So vibes. You live in a nice place, but you feel broke. You're eating ramen in your dream kitchen. This is an attack on me. I love ramen though. I would probably eat ramen like if I had $1 billion. I would. I'd still eat ramen. Although I've found as I've been more upwardly mobile that I'm eating at the restaurant, the ramen restaurant a little bit more. And also stuff like the Nongshim Blacks. Those are really good. Like compared to the old Top Ramen, like shrimp brick. No, I like Top Ramen, okay? This is not sponsored. This is just me loving ramen authentically, me being a ramenophile. But I love the cheap ramen, but I also love the expensive ramen. They're like different dishes. I love them for different reasons. But yeah, eating ramen in your dream kitchen. That's literally me. Another vibe check. You tell your friends, I can't go out, I have a mortgage. Oh, wow. It's a situation where your house is appreciating, but you are depreciating. Womp, 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 womp. So we've got a rough general idea of what being house poor means. Let's talk about why people end up house poor. And let's talk about whether I am actually house poor or not. The answer may surprise you. Okay, so one reason is that people overestimate what they can afford. Like we were just saying, you qualified for it, but that doesn't mean that you can live in it comfortably. The lender considers the suffering your concern. And of course, there are things like unexpected expenses, repairs, rising property taxes, surprise fees. Some people don't realize they have an HOA or don't know what the HOA costs. That's usually listed in Zillow. That's something that has to be disclosed, but sometimes people gloss over it. I know buying a house can be a difficult time and not everybody's super detail oriented. And if you don't have a good agent, I could see this happening, but it is a thing. And it actually doesn't even have to be like user error. As housing costs have risen in recent years, there have been some housing market and location issues that are making everything much harder and making people much more likely to be house poor even if they're doing everything right. Some areas are just expensive. Spending 50% or more of your income on housing is normal in high-cost cities. I am coming to you from a high cost of living city on the West Coast. It is real. I have been as careful as I possibly can be with my spending. When we qualified for the loan on this house, we didn't even factor my income in this. We did it just on my husband's income. And even sometimes I'm like, wow, I can't believe the mortgage cost this, right? And I don't even live in LA or San Diego, one of the cities where it is crazy. Try to find a house in LA that the mortgage doesn't make you pucker. Yeah, forget about it. People are committed. Even people who are making bank are having a hard time. There are lots of factors in all of this. I think one of the most insidious things and pervasive we don't talk about is this American dream pressure to buy, even if renting would be smarter. So we had a house in Ohio that was a starter house that my husband had bought before we actually got together. He bought it after the market crashed in 2008. It was about the time that he could scrape together enough to get a very small starter house. We had that for years and years. I ended up being grandfathered in once we started dating and eventually got married. We sold that off because he got a job in Texas that was higher paying. We moved down there for his job. And we were in Texas for 4 years, and we went into an apartment when we went down there. There was a lot of pressure, a lot of social pressure from friends and people who were really confused that we went and we were renting for a while. We didn't know if we wanted to live in Texas long term. Turns out we didn't. My husband liked it less than I did. I thought it was okay. I'm pretty much happy anywhere though. I'm like a cactus. I could live anywhere and be happy. He's pickier than I am, more discerning, which I suppose that speaks well of me because he picked me, right? But anyway, we didn't know where we wanted to get a house. We knew that the closing costs, if we were going to not be staying there for 5 or 10 years, would be a waste of money. We wouldn't get ahead on equity, that sort of thing. So we rented for a while, and then we ended up going into an RV for a couple of years, living full-time on the road, figuring out where we wanted to live. And again, that was another situation where we were renting, We were renting by the day sometimes where we were staying. And this really confused everybody, but by the time we wanted to get a house, we were able to live in our RV for 6 months locally in the area where we wanted to look. We knew by that point that we actually liked the area. We were able to wait until the housing market was making the most sense it had made in years because it was doing crazy things for a while there. And we picked a house that was really good. It was also a stale listing that had some problems, some fallen through deals. We were able to do that because we had that flexibility. And if we had been trying to jump from one house to another, and if we had been worried about paying 2 mortgages, it wouldn't have happened for us. And for us, the fact that we missed out on some equity because we did not sell at the height of the pandemic, we sold prior, we still had plenty of equity on that house. And we had moved for a higher income job for my husband. That was totally worth it. It was worth more than the equity would have been on the house. So it was a smart move to rent for a while, but I think a lot of people are really opposed to it. And we got so many people who were confused and thought we were making bad financial decisions. It's actually worked out better for us in the long term. It was the fact that we were doing something weird that really confused people. Okay, so we talked about what house poverty is. We've talked a little bit about how it happens. Let's talk about how to fix it. Okay, so the first thing that you can do is to reduce your housing costs. Now, one key way to do this is refinancing if rates drop. That's the one thing for us is we're in a high rates environment. That's killing us more than anything else. Now, nobody knows when rates are going to drop. Hopefully one day, one day my rate will drop. But seriously, we're basically in a situation where we're keeping our credit pristine. When that's a possibility, we will take advantage of that and refi. Another thing you could do is to house hack. So a common way to do this is to rent out a room or a space. We're not currently doing that, but we do have a house that's big enough that we could easily do that. And if one of my friends or family members needs that, we do have that space available. It'd probably have to be somebody I trust and know at this point, especially because I'm trying to run a business. I don't want a huge amount of disruption, and I'm not sure what the rules are in this municipality, but I am in a position to do that. And it's part of why we like this house. It wasn't too much more expensive than the small starter house. That was the weirdest thing of all. We got twice the house and twice the yard for like 25% more. It was like supersized, which tells you how unaffordable the starter houses have gotten, but that's another matter. It just made sense to have that flexibility to be able to rent it out. And you can also consider downsizing if that's realistic. Now, in our high rate environment, it doesn't really make that much sense. And like I was saying, if we're staying in this area and we'd like to, the starter houses are almost the same price, and it would actually be quite a while before we would recoup that small difference because of the closing costs. So, but it is an option, right? To downsize if you're in a big place, if it makes sense. You can find something significantly cheaper that can really help you get out from under it. Okay, so that's one way to help. Another way is to increase your cash flow. So looking at something like side gigs or passive income ideas. I actually have a whole other channel, the Page Turner channel, where I talk about content creation and small business stuff that I will link if you want to take a look. I have a whole playlist for content creators. That is something that I've had a lot of success with. I actually started my business while I was still working at my full-time gig. Eventually it overtook it and it became my full-time gig, and I'm doing much better than I ever did at my day job. But there was a time when I was doing them both. It was stressful, but I did like getting both sources of money. Another thing you can do is if you have home equity built up, you can leverage that home equity strategically. There are things like a home equity line of credit. You could get a second mortgage. I'm not recommending any of this. This isn't financial advice, but there are levers to pull if you do have home equity and you're having some trouble. Which, if you want, I can go into that deeper in another video. Just let me know. And finally, making some adjustments to your budget. Cutting back on non-essentials without feeling deprived. So I would recommend with that you take a look at 2 episodes I've done. I've done one episode on how I budget without hating my life. That has some good strategies, as well as one on dopamine offsets, which is a really interesting tool to kind of balance the cutbacks without feeling emotionally deprived, to actually make sure you can stick to your budget. So am I house poor right now? Well, I'll tell you, I thought I was. When I got it, or I worried I was. I was worried I was. Turns out I'm actually doing okay. I think the thing about it is you always want to do a little bit better. These are very uncertain times economically. If we weren't having some of the issues we're having with the looming recession and all that, I think I would feel a different way. I'm not house poor. I have a good emergency fund. Everything's going okay. I'm just not house rich, and I think I would rather, but that's another thing. I'm doing okay. I was more worried I was house poor than I was actually house poor. So for now, these things can change. Oh, I hate it. I hate it. But yeah, that's kind of where I am right now. But the reality is that being house poor isn't just about the numbers. It's about how it affects your life. Anyway, it's been great talking to you as always. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.